know that you've told me before that your version of Snow White is different and it's more of a 2022 version of Snow White. What did you mean by that?
Don't speak.
I always admire actresses and actors who would play a role that they were absolutely enamored with. You could feel the passion through their work, through their presentation, and even through their interviews. But it seems as of late, many of these people who are playing these roles through the interviews, we see them actually despising the source material.
I was scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again. Like, I'm being so serious. I watched it once and
That's so funny.
And we can't even just blame the actors, because the writers also lose this intense hatred for source material or for the movies on which the movies they're now starring in with the modern versions are based on. It used to be that they would have a certain appreciation and understanding for the time period in which certain movies came out. Granted, the 1930s were ancient, so you would think that people with common sense would understand the movies for what they were when they were. And throughout this interview with this person named Rachel Zegler and many other suggested videos and interviews I've seen of her, all it has successfully done is turned me off from ever watching this remake. Even though I've lost complete faith in Disney and all the remakes and lifeless works that they've put out, this really does not help with their image or with the promotion of their Dead in the Water film. Snow White is supposed to be one of the most likable and affable characters that we've ever seen, and yet the person who is playing her and is supposed to be promoting this movie is acting like the evil queen. She would have been a very good cast for that because her personality fits it exactly.
I mean, you know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird.
So let me get this straight. You understand that for the time period, and this being a fantasy genre cartoon, that it is weird and the guy stalks her, but I would bet you have no problem with modern literature and erotica with women doing the same or entertaining fantasies where the guys do the same. A lot of behaviors that many people find problematic IRL, they're totally capable of compartmentalizing and understanding the difference between fantasy and reality. And they would be totally okay if a rich guy or a vampire or someone like that were to whisk them away and tempt them and seduce them, knowing full well that it would be highly creepy, manipulative, and toxic of a relationship if that were to happen in real life. Hence why these are called fantasy genres.
Isn't it obvious?
They're not real. Furthermore, back then, even if we're talking about an IRL situation, people didn't have social media. And how many of us women, when we're interested in a guy, will check out his social media to make sure he's not a creep? We will stalk him on all his social media platforms to find out what kind of person this is. He doesn't know we exist. We're doing it from afar. And I imagine someday in the future, people are going to look back at people like us today and think that it was highly problematic that we stalked other people on social media without their knowledge. You might make the argument then and say, oh, Tiori, it's not the same thing, you see, because when you make a profile, everyone's there to see it. It's public. That's what it's for. But yet, before the advent of that, these girls would also ask around, kind of talk to his friends, kind of befriend his sister, do some really creepy things. I have heard these same women do that stuff, but that's totally okay. The prince in the movie, which she obviously didn't watch, heard Snow White singing and went into the courtyard and then went up next to her and started singing as well and introduced himself. Now I admit it was very creepy because I would be scared out of my mind if I were singing and someone just popped up beside me all of a sudden and started singing too. Regardless, she showed interest in the prince as well. I'm pretty sure had she told him to go away and she wasn't interested, he would have apologized and left like a gentleman. However, she went back out to see him and it was very clear through their body language, despite them being animated characters, that she was reciprocating the interest. Rachel Zegler sounds like one of those prude people who clutch their crucifix and turns her face up at anything remotely sexual, especially if it has to do with men. While it's okay to have that personal opinion, I don't think it's a good look if you're promoting this kind of movie using the name from the old movie to draw in fans of that franchise or that movie who did see those themes and appreciate those themes and like the movie for what it was. Obviously, you're not going to make everything beat for beat because you do want to change certain things, I guess, so that it translates better and in a live action. But then at that point, if you're gonna change so much that it's barely recognizable as the original movie when you're remaking it to basically be the live action version, why not just make a completely different movie?
So we didn't do that this time.
So no Prince or a different kind of Prince?
We have a different approach to what I'm sure a lot of people will assume is a love story just because, like, we cast a guy in the movie.
Right.
Andrew Burnap, great dude.
Yeah.
It's her condescendingly overly privileged and supercilious attitude for me. Nothing about her character spells likable. Nothing about her character makes me want to go see her playing the main character, Snow White. I understand there's something to be said about separating the artist from the art, but she doesn't even come across as an artist. Okay, that's enough about that, but let's address some of the things that she's saying here and why this is such a problem. While you want to remake a story and you want to make a completely different story that's kind of inspired by an older work, that's fine. There are lots of works that have taken inspiration from older stories and tweaked it a little bit to make it a bit different. However, Disney live action remakes pride themselves on basically bringing the 2D versions of their older movies into live action. So making them a realistic version but still keeping the spirit of the original. Surely you'll add a little bit of detail in there that wasn't in the original. You might even want to tone down some things to a minimalistic degree, like violence or such, because understandably, some people may see it in the live action to be a little bit too graphic, which is still silly to me. But then changing the whole aspect of the characters, instead of adding a little bit more detail and adding more character growth, the way that she's promoting this film or the way she's marketing it honestly makes it seem as though it's uninviting, unappealing, and quite repulsive, something that I as a girl would not be interested in seeing. I mean, Snow White was more than just romance, sure, but she was a girl who wanted that. Most human beings want to feel love and to connect with someone else. So I don't know why we're vilifying that part of the very many themes that were in the original movie.
It's one of those things that I think everyone's going to have their assumptions about what it's actually going to be, but it's really not about the love story at all, which is really, really wonderful. And whether or not she finds love along the way is anybody's guess until 2024. All of Andrew's scenes could get cut. Who knows? It's Hollywood, baby.
Sounds stupid.
What is it with people now being obsessed with killing romance? Many and most of us girls are all about romance. We want the action and the fantasy elements too, but come on, I find it really hot when a girl is an actual character with an actual personality and she falls in love with a guy who's strong and he's an actual character too. None of them being backdrops. As I've said oftentimes, anime is the perfect medium for this. I've watched 5 shoujo anime shows and finished them in the last week and continued with the mangas and finished those too because the stories were so freaking good. Even in the elements like Zom 100, where the female character is in her right a badass, she still is able to save the male and the male is able to save her and she can still be a badass and her own character with standards. Zom 100 is one of the perfect portrayals of that, and actually most anime.
But it's one of those things.
so true,
It's
yeah.
an inner journey that she goes on to find her true self, and she meets a lot of people along the way that
She's just trying to find herself.
This trend of women in modern movies always on a quest to find themselves is getting pretty freaking old, as if by default they're always lost. Like, you can't just have a character who knows who she is. I mean, of course the story of Snow White is her doing that, finding herself and whatnot, but part of finding out who you are is understanding how you fit in the world and how to interact with all the different parts of what make you human. That includes how you interact with other people on a friendship level, on a romantic level. Just cutting out the romantic element just in the sense of empowering her for some reason makes no sense, because then people are going to get the wrong message and think that romance makes them weak, or being in love with someone, or I don't know, giving some of yourself to someone is weakness. Just as the woman shouldn't give all of herself alone to a relationship, the man shouldn't do it either. And it's a very good message to find a balance. Like I said, anime does that really, really well with a lot of them. Even when the girl starts out with the tsundere and the guy is the one who she's chasing, or vice versa, unless it's a kink thing where one is a dominatrix or something like that, usually you find both characters either at an impasse, they blow up on each other, the girl finally stands up to the guy, or the guy finally stands up to the girl, and they break up or whatever, and they come back As complete people, they have found out who they are in the relationship together. I've yet to watch any anime where it starts out with one person being the aloof, stubborn one, and then them not ending up as balanced people later, learning to love each other. The guy, if he's rough and tough, ends up softening. The girl ends up stop being a pushover and stands up for herself. Like, that's usually what happens. That's what romance is supposed to be about. And even if it's not, and the girl is the kind of person who's like, no, I just want this and I want that, there is still a market for that as well. Erasing an element to a genre that has made itself successfully for hundreds upon hundreds of years seems very ridiculous to me. Even the sad individuals who are wallowing in the deepest pits of despair will talk a big game about how they don't like men. They may be people who weigh like 400 pounds, men or women, and they're like, women are disgusting. Guys will talk bad about women and how awful they are, and somebody might have hurt them in the past and they have a warranted reason for feeling that way, but they'll still beat off to women. Like, women will say, oh my god, all men are evil and toxic, look at what he's doing. But they'll still beat off to the erotica that they read about those very toxic men with those toxic traits, and they'll fantasize about those very things they claim they don't like. And you know what? All of it's okay, because those well-rounded human beings that can function in society understand that that is fantasy, and it's totally fine. It is the job of the parents to further educate the children on what is fantasy and what is reality. You know, those memes about reality versus expectation? That's kind of what's going on here. And when people talk like Rachel Zegler, it sounds like they are so far removed from reality, and they take things way too seriously to the point where they feel as though they have to embrace this wild crusading activist role when they're just supposed to be acting as a character in a fantasy project. Elements of it still should be grounded in reality so that people can immerse. I understand that, but they're taking it a little bit too seriously in terms of getting like weirded out about it. Like it's a personal thing, like the prince that she's talking about, actual person. Have you seen the old Snow White, bro? The characters look like they're made of paper mache. They're not real characters, and I think everybody and their grandmother and great-grandmother understood that. It's just people like Rachel that apparently don't have the cognizance for that. I don't know. It's really annoying, and I hope that that's a trend that stops, because what's going to happen is that movies are going to play it safe, and they're going to think that nobody wants to see romance. Nobody wants to see certain things, when in reality, it's only the very vocal, privileged, entitled, and delusional people who are outspoken about this, while the rest of us are quietly spending our money on other works of art that do give us what we want. Hence why companies like Disney are sinking. Anyways, that's my rant. Thanks so much for watching. This has been Ulturi. You ask, we answer.